and welcome back to the Legal Weekly Wine, where we discuss the week's hottest legal topics. I'm your host, Virginia Tarani, and my co-host is Dr. John Vial, the Dean of the Honors College of Middle Tennessee State University. And today it is all about immigration. We have a very special guest with us who is an immigration attorney. It's Abbas Sadiq. And Abbas, tell us what law firm you're with.
Hey, thanks, Virginia. I'm with Sadiq Law Group, and my firm practices immigration, business, and employment law right here in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Fantastic. Now, with your immigration, is that limited to Maryland, or can you do other states?
I can do other states. Actually, I have clients all over the country, and we help clients actually all over the world, those who are interested to come to the United States for business, for pleasure, for family, for investment or employment. We help clients all over the globe.
Fantastic. Well, I can't say thank you enough for joining us. Clearly, I have not been an immigration attorney. I mostly focus on personal injury law, and half my practice through my almost 20 years has been a lot of criminal law. So we are really glad to have your expertise in immigration.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Dr. Vial, I know you have a little more than I do. Dr. Vial's our Constitution expert. He is an expert in the Constitution, the amending process, and constitutional law. And you have written a book regarding immigration.
Actually, you got to be a little bit more modest. I edited a book some time ago called American Immigration and Citizenship, and it's primarily a compilation of documents going all the way, from early in American history up to, I'm trying to remember, I need to add a new chapter on Donald Trump, because I think, the last entry I have in here is 2016, and a lot has happened since 2016.
He needs his own chapter and some updates on that. Absolutely.
Okay.
But that's what we're here to talk about is Dr. Vial, you and I have been talking many different weeks about the different immigration policies that have been put in place, people who have been taken out of the country. And what we're going to do today is we're going to do a two-parter where we start with some basics on immigration law from our expert, who's going to walk us through some of that. And then we're going to hit, especially on part two, a little bit on part one, but especially on part two, what actually is happening, whether you think it's legal, how it normally works, and what can people do. Because Dr. Vial, you were telling us earlier that even the students, there's a possibility of ICE coming on your campus. So we'll figure that out, what your school is actually telling you. I'll talk about some of my clients, because even though I do personal injury, my clients are also affected by this, and we're actually missing one. So I'd love to talk with you about it, Dr. Vial and Abbas. Do you mind if I call you Abbas?
Not at all.
All right. So the thing is Abbas is my friend, in addition to being our attorney expert on immigration. So I am pleased to have you as my friend as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm glad that Virginia has some friends.
Hey. I'm glad I have friends too. Yes, and Dr. Vial, for those who don't know, is my father, so we've got that extra connection. So here we are, a group of friends and family. And we're going to drink as friends and family. Now, Abbas has passed on drinks, which is shocking on our program.
He has, and he has some water.
I do have some water right here.
He does, just in case. And so Dr. Vial has some water. I need to drink on this. But for all of those who need to know, I am not an alcoholic. I'm drinking one glass for happy hour on our program of the weekly wine. So I have a nice Moscato, as always. Bartonura Moscato d'Asti is what I am drinking today. And cheers to both of you.
All right, cheers.
I'm excited about our episode.
So is yours domestic or foreign?
It's foreign.
So be expected to pay at least 10% more next week. Or next
Yes,
time you buy.
with our tariffs. I do need
none
to.
of us can afford to be alcoholics if we're dependent on wine.
Yeah, it's definitely going to change our drinking habits.
On the other hand, there will probably be an excess of Jack Daniels, because my understanding is they pulled it from the shelf in Canada since we're imposing tariffs on them.
Well, I hope more people like Jack Daniels. And on that note, Abbas, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your background in the law, and then immigration law in particular.
Yeah, so I'm an attorney licensed in Maryland and D.C., And I worked at the Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor, for nearly 20 years.
Wow.
So I'm very experienced with labor relations, employment law, EEOC claims, disparate treatment claims, severance agreements. A lot of experience. I worked my way up after law school at the Department of Labor.
Wow.
And eventually got to a director level. And I really enjoyed it. And then what happened was during COVID, I had a chance to spend a little bit more time at home, like all of us. And I started to wonder, what would it be like to have my own practice? And I slowly started to grow that. And I realized that it would be better for me to leave the government and pursue my law practice full time. And that's what I did. It's been a little bit over a year now that I've had my own private practice. And as we discussed earlier, I was able to expand into immigration and other aspects of employment law and business law.
Amazing. So all the law that I don't do, go to Abbas Sadiq. He can get you covered in Maryland and DC, and with immigration, apparently pretty much anywhere.
Yes, all over the world, right?
Which is incredible because with the type of practice that I do, I'm Maryland, DC, and Virginia, and I don't have foreign. There's nothing I can do. It's mostly personal injury law that I do. I handle some other matters, but nothing like the range that you have. So
yeah, it's interesting. I've been able to travel to different parts of the world, and I've talked to people from China, India, the Middle East, Canada. Literally all over the world. It's amazing just to see how people live and what their life is like, their expectations, their desires, their hopes, their family situation. It's really, really fascinating to me. It's one of the things I like about immigration is just to see how other people live and what their life is like.
That's really incredible. And for it, not only do you see other people's lives, but you see different courts than I do, right?
Definitely, yeah. Get to see other courts. What are their rules? What are their regulations? And how do we interact with that? How does how is U.S. immigration law and policy perceived throughout the world? It's really fascinating to me just to go and visit other countries and see how people are living, what their life is like, the expectations are, even what is their food like, what is their culture like. I really enjoy it.
Good for you. I definitely don't travel that much. Maybe you should take me with you next time. Now, with this immigration, I think it would be very hard for me to just pick up because it is in immigration courts. There's a whole nother set of laws and rules that it would almost be like starting from the very beginning for me.
Right. So, yeah, I was pretty, when I first started, I was a little bit intimidated as well. Immigration court technically is not a court in the sense of, like your father, Dr. Weil, would know, it's not a constitutional court. So it's administrative court. So it's an administrative hearing, but when you go there, you definitely feel like it's a court. All the formalities and rules of procedure, which you're familiar with, apply. And it is very formal. So you feel like you're in a court, but technically it's not. I think it's an Article 3. It's not an Article 3 court. It's not like a federal district court, but it's formal. And in that case, your opponent is the government.
Wow.
And usually it's Department of Homeland Security or DHS counsel.
Okay.
So what I found is, again, it can depend on how vigorous. Some DHS counsel are very open and flexible, and they're willing to work with us, and we represent the respondent or the individual that's in removal. They can be very friendly, they can be very open, or they can be very hard-nosed. So it's probably similar to some of your experience in court.
Absolutely. I mean, Dr. Weil, you even know, even with mock trials that you used to coach in college, it just depended on what school you met, what other opponent you had, there's a very different approach to how people negotiate, how they respond to you, and how they even act in court.
So let me ask a question here. Must be an Article 1 court. So is that right? So
yeah, I believe it might be an article.
Legislative rather than a. Yeah. So do the judges have tenure? Is that an area where President Trump could intervene?
So it's a little bit confusing. So the immigration court, it's called the EOIR, or the Executive Office of Immigration Review. So it's under the Department of Justice. So on the one hand, when someone is in removal proceedings or when they're detained, that's actually under USCIS, which is under Department of Homeland Security. But when they're in formal immigration court, that's under the Department of Justice. So the attorneys that are representing the government are actually DHS attorneys, but you're in the DOJ administrative court. So it's a little bit confusing. But I
guess
think
what I'm worried about or wondering is, we had this effort by the president to fire members of independent agencies who are not Republicans, not Trump Republicans.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is there a chance that the president could reach down and say this immigration judge has been too liberal? I'm assuming they don't have, service during good behavior. If
Right.
that's
So
possible or if it's happened?
I'm not sure about the tenure, but I know what happened in the previous Trump administration under Jeff Sessions, because technically the immigration judges, they basically report to the Attorney General, right? So in this case, that's Pam Bondi. So what could happen is she could basically remove cases from the docket and adjudicate them herself. And I think that's what
even in immigration courts.
Yeah. So I think that's what happened last time, and that's what Jeff Sessions was doing. So they do publish, it's available online, like what is the record of immigration court, like the judge, basically, what is their record in terms of asylum approvals, whether it's granted or not. So that you can just Google that and find that. And I think the judges are definitely under pressure to remove as many people as quickly as possible. I don't know about the tenure situation, but they're, like I said, they're not really judges in the sense they're not appointed and confirmed by the Senate. I do think they are appointed by the president, but they're kind of under the direction or under the authority of the Attorney General.
So with that, I'm going to add into this part of the questioning is with the shift, with Pam Bondi taking over, with the Trump administration coming in, are you seeing a different shift in the policies or the procedures or even the way that the attorneys, the DHS attorneys are interacting with you versus last year when we were still under Biden?
I think it depends on this is a great question. I think it depends on the judge and the attorney, the DHS attorney. So some judges are just boom, they'll just get right to it and they're very okay, this person is going to get removed. It's going to be an uphill battle. But then other judges and attorneys are very, fair and I recently had a client, and I mean, this was a juvenile. This girl was like 14 years old, and she came across the border alone. She was totally petrified. Her brother was here, so she was here with her brother, but she was she was shaking. But the judge was very nice. I went ahead and I told the clerk, I said, hey, I have a juvenile, and he cleared the courtroom, made sure we were the only ones there. He was really nice. He went out of his way to make her comfortable. But she was freaked out. I mean, she didn't speak English. It was totally foreign to her. And regardless of the reasons of why she came to the U.S. and whatnot, but I mean, she was very afraid at the end of the day. So it was nice. The judge was really kind. He told me, hey, you don't have to bring her. You can just do it online if you want. I'll give you the link. And he gave me a lot of leeway for her case, which was great. And then another time I had a really nice DHS attorney, and I thought we had enough to get the case dismissed, and the attorney was really good. He said, no problem, I'll agree to the dismissal. So it's just kind of a case-by-case basis.
So even with the administration change, it's still a case-by-case basis with the specific attorneys that you work with on the other side?
I think so, but I'm sure the judges feel pressure. The judges must feel pressure to move the cases and to basically remove as many people as possible. Now, I'm guessing if there's a judge that's constantly granting asylum, that judge is going to show up on the radar.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they'll do. The Attorney General could take those cases and issue them make a decision herself. So I'm sure they feel pressure.
Absolutely.
May I ask a related question that goes back to a previous one of these that we've done? And I don't know if it affects your practice yet or not, but I'm very concerned about President Trump's interpretation of the birthright citizenship provision of the 14th Amendment. My understanding, we've had a long series of precedents that suggests, if you're born in the the explicit language of the 14th Amendment, all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens there and subject to the jurisdiction are citizens thereof. Have you had any cases yet in which the government is trying to deny citizenship to someone who was born here on the basis that their parents were not here legally?
No, I haven't had any of those cases yet, but I agree with you, Dr. Vile, and I find that that's obviously very troubling. And just in general, the broader issue, I think, of this rapid expansion of presidential or executive power is just
Yes.
amazing to see. It's like incredible in amount of, I mean, it's hard to believe it's only been a couple of months.
Yes.
And our whole, like the Constitution or the expansion of the executive authority,
Yes.
the acquiescence of basically the legislative branch, right? Congress, Senate, just basically
May I say capitulation?
capitulation.
That's a fair word. Yeah.
And just some of these policies, aside from the birthright issue, but the disappearance of people who are lawfully here,
Yes.
the removal of certain individuals without due process. It seems like this would really take decades, but it's only been a couple of months.
Yeah. So that I'm glad you said that, because I'm going to pick up on one of your terms. You said due process. Let's put the Trump administration aside. Normally, in immigration courts, are they supposed to observe due process even for non-citizens or people who are in front of immigration courts?
That's a great question. And let me be clear. Regardless of your status, whether you're here legally, illegally, whether you're on a visa, whether you have a green card, whether you're a born U.S. citizen or naturalized, we all have the same rights under the Constitution. It doesn't distinguish, right? Aside from the right to vote. But we're all entitled to free speech. We're all entitled to due process. So even the individual who came over across the border without inspection or without authorization, that person is entitled to due process. And it's one of the fundamental components of our Constitution is that someone can claim asylum. And when they do, they have a right to notice in a hearing. And although it's a little different from some of the cases where there's no Sixth Amendment right to counsel, but these individuals are given rights and they are made aware that they can have an attorney, not at the expense of the government. But it's important that we hear these cases out and we give them, these individuals, an opportunity to prepare and to have that notice and a hearing. Because if we take that away from people who are coming to this country who are desperate, then what's next, right? We're starting down with the people who essentially have no voice, right? They really don't have much. Typically, they don't have much money and they don't speak English. They're kind of at the bottom. So if we take away the right for due process for them, what's next?
Right.
What would happen to us?
Exactly. And that's where I think Dad and I's fear is in a normal immigration case, if someone has come over here illegally, are they still entitled to notice and a hearing through these courts?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Are they held? Are they detained normally? If they're picked up as illegals, are they held pending hearing and notice, or are they released? How does that even work?
That's a great question. It's a little bit analogous to, I think, what you might have seen in the criminal law sector, where typically if they're not a danger, they don't pose a danger to the public, and there's substantial likelihood that they'll return for subsequent hearings, they'll generally be released without bond. And that's the vast majority. I mean, that's probably 98, 99% of people. But that's what has changed. So now they are being held. Now they are being, what we would call disappeared.
Yeah.
They're being disappeared. They're being held. And it's very difficult for their families because I have a client and basically she's a U.S. citizen and this is in Texas. So her husband, who doesn't have any status, dropped her off at a bus stop. And then she was going to some party. So then on the way home, he was driving, and I'm not sure whether he didn't use his signal or what happened, but he got pulled over. And then that's
For a basic traffic stop.
traffic citation. But in Texas, you cannot have a driver's license without a social security number, which is different from Maryland. I don't know how it is in Virginia.
Yeah.
So
Maryland, I think, is one of the few states that will give illegal immigrants a driver's license, at least for them to make, for me, I think that's there's so many things about it, but I would rather them have driver's licenses because they have to go through the tests and the same certifications to be able to drive. But I think we are one of the very few states that actually provides licenses to any kind of illegal status immigrants.
Right. So basically, this individual got pulled over, and then he didn't have a license. That triggered the officer to call the Customs and Border Patrol. So anyway, they detained this man, and his wife could not find him for like 4 days. She was calling me frantic, and the police wouldn't tell her because they didn't know. I mean, all they knew was that Customs and Border Patrol came and picked him up, but they don't know where they took him. So no one knew where he was, basically, for 4 days. It was a nightmare. And she has 2 little kids. It was, for her, it was terrible. And we can argue all day about the merits of coming here, without authorization and whatnot. But do we really want to put people in this situation where they're, this is a U.S. citizen, the woman with 2 little kids, who's not sure where her husband is? I mean, do we want to be doing that?
Dr. Vile, it looks like you've got a question there.
Well, I have a concern, which is there have been at least 2 or 3 cases that I have read where someone is arrested in New York, and so the attorney files a case in New York, and it turns out by the time, maybe before, maybe after they file this, the person has moved to Texas, and then they're told, well, we can't accept your case because you filed in the wrong court. And there's another recent case where apparently there's alternate methods of filing, and they said, well, you should have filed a writ of habeas corpus instead of administrative, whatever the alternative is to that. Have you encountered that yet? Because that is really serious.
Yeah, I've heard about it on the news, and you may be familiar with some of the criminal procedure moves.
Yeah.
But my understanding about that one was that individual was moved to Louisiana because obviously the government thought that the court would be more favorable towards their position.
Right.
And they tried to do it quickly before anything could be filed in New Jersey, thinking that, if he is in Louisiana, then the New Jersey and New York courts wouldn't have any jurisdiction over him.
Yeah.
But it was really, I think we should all be concerned, regardless of what your position is. It's really back to what you were saying, Dr. Vile, a constitutional law issue. And those are fundamental rights, right, that we learn in law school, first semester, right? They're enshrined in our Constitution, and they apply to everyone. It doesn't matter what your status is. You're still entitled to notice in a hearing. You're still entitled to, certain protections under the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment, right? But what's happening, those are unfortunately being eroded, and they're being eroded under the guise of immigration. And for me, it's more like, is this really immigration or is this Constitution law, right? So it seems more like immigration is kind of the cloak, but when you pull the cloak, you see that this is really a constitutional law issue, and our criminal procedure rights, our First Amendment rights are under attack, basically.
And in my mind, it's like, and Dad, you and I have talked about this, is if we say, well, they're not entitled to due process, right, because they're illegal, then how do we have even jurisdiction over them? You can't have it both ways. Either we have jurisdiction to, charge or convict them of crimes, pick them up through immigration, put them through due process, or if they're totally illegal and we don't have jurisdiction, then we can't charge them with crimes. We can't pick them up and deport them. So to me, you can't have it both ways.
So, as a father and a husband, I am particularly concerned about two things. One is the notion that anybody could be surrounded by agents who may or may not have identified themselves and may have masks and be pulled off the street. And I'm particularly concerned now that I find out that there's someone in an El Salvadorian prison that the United States agrees is not a member of the gang that was supposed to be sent down there from Argentina or Venezuela. Anyway, whatever the gang is. And they're saying, we're sorry, but we can't get him back because he's now under the authority of El Salvador.
Right, we can't make them do anything.
The United States does not have the power to extract an American citizen unlawfully held from a foreign prison. None of us are safe. And we go back, I looked it up, by the way, Reverend Niemöller.
Okay.
They came after the
yes,
socialists, and I was not a socialist. They came after the trade unionists. I wasn't a trade unionist. They came after the Jews, and I wasn't Jewish. And now there's nobody left to protect me.
Yeah.
Our rights are in a bundle. If due process can be withheld from somebody else, it could also be withheld from us.
Yeah, the thing that
sermon for the day. Sorry.
Right. No, I appreciate it. And Dad, one of the things that you brought up, which I think is also scary, and my question to you, Abbas, is with these masked men who have been identified as government enforcement, who are, I hate to say kidnapping because they have rights to pick up people who could be subject to immigration laws and deportation. Have you ever seen any type of pickup or enforcement or detaining of people who are subject to immigration and deportation like this before, or is this new?
This is new to me, and it's very troubling, as we've all been kind of saying, because it's very abrupt. And I agree with what Dr. Weil had shared, that, watching some of these, now everything's on video, right? You can see it.
Yeah.
So watching videos of these men basically accost this woman who's a student, a PhD student,
right,
on the way to break her fast was it's outrageous, because it's like, who are they?
Yeah.
They didn't really identify. They right away one man put his hands on her, and it was totally like, what is going on? What country is this in? I mean, we would think that, okay, this is Russia.
Right.
This is China. This is some other country, right?
Or even Mexico, and you're getting taken by a gang.
But hello, this is Boston, right? And then the other video a lot of us saw was the other man in New York, right? In Colombia. His wife is 8 months pregnant, and she's like begging with them. She's got her attorney on the phone, and they didn't care. And they wouldn't really explain what it was about. So where are we living, really? I mean, we would mock other countries, and we would say, like, hey, luckily that's not us.
Right.
That's them. That's not us. Well, guess what? That's us now, right?
Yeah.
And that used to be the classic distinction between democracies and autocracies. Was in a democracy, you didn't have to worry about the knock on the door in the middle of the night.
Right.
And we're very close to that.
Right. It's like, is the Gestapo at the door, right? Who is picking us up? And, forgive I know it's saying that term can be inflammatory, but that I think is a fear that even some of my clients are expressing is the SS type of agency going to be picking us up. They're making those terms. They're making those suggestions. It feels like this is a different government, a different set of law enforcement, rather than the normal ICE agents or the normal police who would pick us up and then detain us and transfer us to ICE has been the biggest concern.
And the law, one of the laws that we're using is a law that we have not, to my knowledge, used since World War I, which was one of the more repressive times in American history, and was adopted, my understanding, was adopted during times of war not against gangs, although I certainly don't favor gang membership,
Right. Now, none of
but
us do.
was directed against nations rather than against gangs, and it was nations where we had declared war. And there is a division of power in the Constitution between declaring war, which is a congressional power, and waging it with the presidential. And it says it's as though the president is waging a war that has not really been declared.
Yeah, so I want to take us back real quick before we end part one. I want to take us back to some basic definitions because I struggle with it and I can't imagine, and I'm an attorney. I know I don't do immigration law, but even I struggle with this. I'd love to hear from you, Abbas, what the different statuses are and how they're different. I mean, U.S. citizen seems like an easy one. But it used to be easy. Now we're questioning birthright citizenship. But apart from U.S. citizens who were born here and are considered U.S. citizens, how does the status work from there? Who gets a visa? Who gets a green card? Are there different levels of who's supposed to be more protected?
Yeah, so just to keep it simple, on the first level, you could have a visitor visa. So visas are generally, they're temporary and they're for a specific purpose. So some of us have family overseas in other countries and maybe they come and visit us on a visitor visa.
Okay.
That's generally, they're allowed to come for about 6 months. They're not allowed to work, but they're allowed to come here for business or pleasure reasons. That's kind of the first level. And there are different types of visas. Some are work visas where they have a specific reason where maybe they're working for Tehrani law.
Sure.
And they're just here to do that. They're not allowed to work somewhere else. They need permission for that. And that's really what their purpose is, just to work.
And with that, before they come in, do they have to have already found and tagged a business, or can they come in and then choose a business to work with?
Almost always they need a business first.
Okay.
They have to have an employer who will file a petition, and then it's a complicated process. And it usually involves certification through the Department of Labor that shows that the employer did due diligence and ensured that there was no one in the local labor market who was able to take that job. So if you're hiring a paralegal and you wanted to hire someone from India, then you would have to first do your due diligence and show the Labor Department that you tried to hire somebody in the area where you advertised, who applied, and then they would only after they certified that, yes, Virginia Tehrani, you did your due diligence, you couldn't find anyone, you would be able to then petition USCIS to bring someone in from another country. So it's complicated.
How long do they get to stay?
Well, they usually get to stay as long as you have the job available to them.
Okay.
But so the visa is kind of the lower category. But again, they're all afforded the same rights. They can't vote, but they still have due process. They still have First Amendment rights, right to speak.
Yeah.
So
what about, is a T visa in there? What's that versus even, I know a lot of, and Dr. Vial, you have some at Middle Tennessee State University of people who are here for schooling. What are those different visas?
Yeah, so there are different types of visas. So we were just talking about employment visas, visitor visas. There are student visas, which is a F1 visa for students who is similar to the employment process, but the school agrees to sponsor them, and they pay their fees to the school. Usually they're not eligible for financial aid, and they're just here to go to school.
Okay.
And then there are humanitarian visas, like a T visa, which is for someone who is maybe trafficked, someone who was brought here against their will, or someone who was abused related to their employment. There's a U visa, which is for someone who is here and they were a victim of a crime. Like I have some clients who they were assaulted, they were robbed, they were carjacked. They didn't have a legal status, but because they were a victim of a crime and they reported that crime to law enforcement and they cooperated, they're then eligible for a certain type of humanitarian visa.
Now, with that, though, the way you're describing it is as if they're a victim of a crime in the U.S.
Yes. Yeah, only in the U.S., right. Yeah.
Okay. What about asylum? Is that different than, this was a U visa?
Yes.
How is that different from the asylum?
So asylum comes under humanitarian, but it's not a visa. Asylum is a process to eventually get a green card. It's a process where those people flee their home country. Suppose they're, like right now, there's a lot going on in Venezuela, gangs and whatnot. So they leave their country, they enter the U.S., and then right away they apply for asylum, and they show that they have a credible fear, and that there's something direct and imminent harm that will happen to them. So it's not just,
if they stay or return to that country.
If they return, right. So it's not just like, my country is overrun by gangs, but it's like, my country is overrun by gangs, I was attacked, here's proof, and now they're threatening my parents that if I go back, they're going to kill me. So it has to be credible and imminent.
If I may add, these are governed in part by international conventions, right? We're signatories to treaties or maybe United Nations rules. So these are not unique to the, I mean, we may have a cap. Do we have a cap on the number of people that we take through asylum?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
There is a cap on like U visas, on T visas. But you're correct, Dr. Val. One of the claims in immigration court, in addition to asylum, is called the Convention Against Torture. So that's a UN standard to just say, look, even if you don't buy the asylum claim, I will be tortured, or this person will be tortured if they're returned home.
Right.
So back to your original question, Virginia. So there's different types of visas: employment. There's family-based visas. You want to sponsor your parents. That's family. And then there's humanitarian. So we have visas, kind of the first level. Then after that, we have what's called LPR, or lawful permanent resident. Those are the ones who get the green cards.
Okay, so that's essentially the same thing as a green card.
Yes.
Or the same terminology for it.
Same, yeah.
So how do people get a green card versus these what seem to be temporary visas, or maybe you'll get a kind of visa? What's the difference?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is complicated because not all visas lead to a green card. Some do, some don't. So what may happen is someone may be at Dr. Vile's school, and they may be on a student visa, and then maybe they find their love and they decide to get married. And it turns out that that person they're marrying is a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
So then that person can then sponsor them through a family-based visa, and then they can get a green card.
Okay.
So not every visa leads to a green card or a lawful permanent resident status. Some do, some don't. So if they are never able to get their green card, at some point they're going to have to go home. A lot of the times the goal is, it had been, and maybe that's changing now with all of the immigration stuff happening here, is if they find a way to get a green card, they can. And then green card, after green card comes the naturalized citizenship process, which is the last step.
And how long does that take? Do you have to have a green card then to do the citizenship? And if so, how long?
Yes, you have to have a green card. It varies. It could be 5 to 10 years, depending on the type of the green card. But I mean, our process is pretty rigorous. Of course, we do background checks, and we want to check, the moral character, any crimes of moral turpitude.
Sure.
Things like that are checked. We want to get affidavits from neighbors, friends, employers. You're paying your taxes. What's interesting is one of the first things we do to people who don't even have a legal status is collect taxes.
Oh.
So people who might not even have a
That's
legal
not
status,
surprising.
they can't vote, and apparently they don't have due process, but they have to pay their taxes.
Oh, how funny. Okay. Now with that, I want to kind of end it now that we've got the status situated, and some of the political questions already started, but I want everybody to stay tuned. Hopefully we've whet your appetite for part 2, where we're going to go into more of these examples, more of what you're seeing from your clients, Dr. Vile, what's happening on your campus, what's happening with my clients, what the general atmosphere is, and if there's anything that can be done. So, Abbas, thank you for joining us. And this is, again, Abbas Sadiq. And we've had Dr. Vile with us, John Vile. I'm Virginia Tarani. And we're going to catch you next time on the Legal Weekly Wine.